Hello, good
Hi,
afternoon.
hello.
How are you?
Good, good. Everything's okay. How are you?
Everything, everything is going well, despite of the lockdown. We've been almost a month. No, yeah, 1 month already.
Yeah, I
And
know. I came from Spain and I also was in quarantine during all this period. So,
yes, but it's everything will be fine. So, what about you?
so sitting here
You're in
and
Moscow?
I'm in Moscow, yes. So now is a great opportunity to do some analysis of the data and write papers. And so we finished one paper already, and we just sent it yesterday. And so it also related to the altitude training and hypoxic dose quantification. So hope to have it soon published. And yes, now it's a great opportunity for us to analyze data and to work a little as more as a scientist and less than practitioners.
Practitioner. Yeah, I was saying I'm working more than before, despite of not having the trips and the travels and all the courses and everything. So I cannot understand how people is getting bored at home because I cannot cope with all the courses that are online, all the talks that people is doing, like the one we are just hosting now. It's just crazy times, but yeah, we need to see the positive side, and yeah, just take advantage of this period. Then we will
Yeah,
start with
that's
the
true.
trips again. So
That's
first,
true.
first of all, I would like to thank you for taking the time of joining this initiative, the Coffee Talks. And this is the third week I'm doing them, and I can say so far they have been extremely well welcomed by those who are now listening to us. So yeah, I know you're, as you well said, you're busy. So thank you very much for taking the time to join me for this hour.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I saw, yes, you invited a lot of my friends. So, and also I'm happy to join you tonight.
Good. So first of all, I would like you to introduce yourself, because who better than you to explain well, what you do and your sport background, etc., etc.
Briefly, my background is sports sciences and sport medicine. So it's not a regular story when sports scientists combine the sport medical background. And so for a long period of time, firstly, I started to work in the sports science laboratory, and then I was working a lot with the different teams and as a sport medical doctor. And I try to keep going, combining these two approaches when athletes need my help as a sport medical doctor when they are ill. So I provide them this type of approach, and when they are okay, but they would love to enhance their performance in the legal way. So I try the ways how with the science and with the latest research I can help them to improve their performance and show very best potential that they can show. So, and from my point of view, altitude training is one of the perfect tools for the performance enhancement. And I'm working in this field already more than 10 years. And also, so when I started to work in the sports science laboratory, I also dedicated more to the fundamental studies related to hypoxic response and the mechanism of the response to different types of hypoxia. So actually this topic is with me for so long time, from very fundamental mechanisms to very practical approach. And so I still love it and keep going, doing some research and now we started to write a book about altitude training, so we keep going.
I always say that I'm privileged to be living where I'm living right now, because I have the high altitude training center here in Granada, just 40 minutes away from my home. It's just for me, and I kept saying this during the coffee talks, that usually we will have this conversation up there. So it's not through the screen, but I used to, every time you are around, just go upstairs to the mountain and just catch up while you're doing job or you have your breaks with the trainings and everything. So the high altitude is a topic that really interests me too, and I do believe it's an essential tool for, as you well said, legally enhancing the athlete's performance. And that's why one of the reasons I wanted you to be on board and just share your valuable input, because you have a wide experience in the area, and I think it was quite important. So basically, the way why I started those coffee talks was, as you well know, I work for the ITU in the development department, and I run courses all over the world, but for those federations that are still, let's say, labeled as development ones. So those that are in the process of becoming developed federations. So a lot of coaches have obviously thousands of questions, because they either have limited access to the resources available or to the knowledge available, or they don't really have enough experience to apply all what is available into the proper practice. So when I'm saying that I'm living here in Granada and we do a lot of high altitude training camps and I go up there quite often, then they just smash you with questions. How should I do it? For how long? What kind of considerations do I need to take before, during, and after going up there? So that's why I am. They already have heard from me, but I wanted them to hear from someone else. So that's why you are on board today. So first of all, I would like you to briefly explain me why it's important for athletes to use the altitude training.
So first of all, I would like to say hello to my friends who are joining our direct talk. And so coming back to your question, the altitude training is a really, also coming back to your comments, actually, the altitude training is the field when you really need to get experience, and when you start to get experience on your own athletes, and when you make mistakes on your own athletes, is not really a good story. And that is why, actually, also from my opinion, if you have the possibility to connect with some professionals who are working in the field of altitude training, better to do it, because from one point you can enhance performance using altitude training, and from another point of view, you actually can destroy your athlete and finish his career. And this is very, opposite. Opposite results.
To what you want, actually, yeah.
Yeah, opposite results of the altitude training. You wanted to enhance performance to your athlete, and finally he need to finish his career or recovery during 1 year. So it's not really good story for the coach. And of course, I know a lot of coaches who did these mistakes and who are really scared about the altitude training and its application. And of course, a lot of coaches, they have a lot of questions about altitude training, because there are too many variables that you should control or you should know to actually help athlete to benefit from this type of training. And coming back to your question about why actually athlete need the altitude training, so there are different types of altitude training, and recently one more new paper of group of Gregoire Millet, Olivier Gerard was published. So it's a new paradigm of the altitude training, and there are now more than 14 different types of altitude training and different types of hypoxic training. Also, when you use artificial hypoxia, when you can actually improve every quality that you need. You can improve, if you are endurance athlete, you can improve your aerobic capacity. If you need to improve your buffer capacity, you can do it with altitude training. If you would like to improve your repeated sprints ability, you can do it with altitude training. If you want to work more on strength, you can do strength training in altitude, or different types like the occlusion strength training, or you can improve your economy and other capabilities. So actually every type of altitude training provides us different improvements in physiological way. And so in my work also I come in from the more from the physiological pathways. So first for me it's important to understand which part of performance you would like to improve, or what limitation athletes has. And then when I know his limitation, for example, he needs to improve aerobic capacity, improve, for example, total hemoglobin mass amount. So here perfectly can fit types of altitude training like lift high, train high, lift high, train low, and lift high, train low and high. So there are a lot of different methods, but yeah, you should always decide to go from your athlete and from his requirements. So you don't need just to start every method. So choose the best that fits season, that fits athletes, that fits coach, of course. So, and all the year plan of preparation.
I often seen in the center here in Granada a lot of people that went up for the first time, and they obviously get excited by the fact of having, you know, such an amazing facilities, the surroundings, and every time they go up there, that means they don't have to worry about anything else but training. So they want to just squeeze as many hours of training as possible. So when they reach up there and you say, no, first week, it's easy. You need to do just a little training. They do not really understand until the day, because we always come by days, day 3 or 4, the reality hits them and they cannot walk upstairs, or they had a headache the night before, etc., etc. So if you want to, what would be your advices for those that want to train in altitude for the first time, and kind of recommendations they should take into consideration before going up there, while staying up there, and then after?
So it's actually a really big question that you asked.
Yeah,
so I
tried to summarize a little bit, because that's actually
I will divide it
a
into
PhD.
small parts.
Yeah.
But first of all, I would like to start with this altitude training center in Sierra Nevada. So when me personally, I went there for the first time, I was really amazed about the facilities. So I strictly recommend for those who would love to have an altitude training at the altitude from 2,400 meters to 3,000, if I don't mind.
You can put up, yeah,
you can go to Villeta, for example, to
3,300. Yeah, so it's,
yeah, so you can do a lot of different types of training. There is a road upstairs, so you can do different types of like lift high, train high, for example, or go down and do lift high, train low. So these approaches are available at this center. And so if you are going for the first time at the altitude, you are the coach or you are athlete who is going for the first time. So first of all, don't expect a lot from this training camp. I think this is the main idea that you should have, because sometimes in the first training camp it can feel really difficult with this, as you mentioned, acute mountain sickness syndromes, like a headache, like poor sleeping, and then actually from my experience, it's very difficult for an athlete to, in the first training camp at altitude, to make the all training plans. So that actually training plan should be modified for the athlete who is going for the first time at altitude, and coach should be very patient and do not expect from athlete that he will actually complete all these workloads that he was expected that he will do. Another story, of course, and actually training camp at altitude begins actually 3 weeks before the training camp in altitude, because you should be very well prepared for this. So you should be in the very good fit to have to make possible do all the training loads at altitude. You should be free of illness and of any type of injury, because it influences a lot, first in the erythropoiesis, and from the second part that all the illnesses, they getting worse at the altitude, so you will not benefit, or you can actually get worse at the altitude. And then the third thing is about the availability of the substrate. The main substrate that we need, that body needs at altitude, is iron to produce erythrocytes. So if the levels of iron are low, like around 10, 15 nanograms, so it's not enough to produce enough erythrocytes, and this is anemic athletes. So first of all, they should do biochemistry analysis, understand that all the levels of the ferritin, iron, transferrin, and others are in the target zones. For example, the ferritin levels now are recommended to have in athletes more than 30 nanograms, and then so if it's low, you should have time to increase this substrate, because if you do test like 1 day before or 2 days before the altitude, so you will not have time to
take any kind
to
of
make
yeah.
any, yes, to make any changes. So, and this is very important to have this time to also to solve any type of issues that can actually be can happen. And also another story is, of course, to do some briefing with athletes before the altitude, because sometimes athlete doesn't know that it can be cold or that the weather can change very rapidly at altitude. So it can be sunny, but in the moment, actually it can be a snowstorm
Yeah.
in every time. So they should be prepared also with the clothes and actually also psychologically to this environment. And also, I think it's really good to also make some briefing before the first time of the altitude with the athlete, that you can feel these, for example, symptoms. And there is a very good one, Lake Lewis questionnaire, that actually helped to see how severe the mountain sickness is. So it's questions about headache, about how do you sleep, how do you feel, how is your stomach, and things. Very, very simple question. You answered like from 0 to 5, and here, so you have all the information about the athlete. So, and then when you come to altitude, so coach should be very attentive to his athlete, and the most important period is the first days of acclimatization. And here the training load, of course, should be decreased. And from one point of view, coach can make this mistake and make training load very intensive. And from other point, also athletes, I see that they also do this mistake, and they don't like to go in the zone 2. They would love to go faster, zone 3, all out, yeah. First day, while we are just jogging, we want to do something very fast, so we are feeling okay. And this is also very the situation that actually coach should control, because if they overload in the first couple of days, they will have a decrease in performance in the next week. So actually the main goal is that gradually performance increase at altitude from day first to day, for example, after 14 days, you have totally acclimatized athlete, and this athlete can do very severe workloads, for example, glycolytic workloads, and the intensity of the training should increase. But if first week is not like it should be, slow, adaptive, so your athlete will be dead actually after 2 weeks at altitude. And this is also important. For everybody who goes at altitude, I really recommend to take pulse oximeter. I don't have it near to show, so this is the fingertip pulse oximeter that helps to measure the value of oxygen in the blood and heart rate. And so every day in the morning, if athlete measure his heart rate and saturation, you can see that gradually these parameters, saturation in the blood increases and heart rate decreases. So when you see that, like every day, starting from day 1, like day 1 arrival, first day 90% from 100, then 91, then 92, then 93. So you see a good progression of the adaptation to the altitude, and the heart rate is decreasing. So for example, normal heart rate at the sea level for your athlete is 35. And then at the altitude in the first day, you see 50, for example, 55, and then you see that it's gradually decreased. So it's also a very good sign that everything goes okay. And so after 1 week, you will have already parameters that will be nearly the sea level, or even in some athletes who adapt very well, it can be the same. So this is the sign for you that you actually, as a coach, you can start hard training right ahead. But sometimes you can see also other
it's happening
dynamics.
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and for example, saturation can drop down, or it can be related with some illnesses, for example. And here you can actually be very attentive to the this parameter, because it's very, I think it's very essential information that it can provide you, saturation and this questionnaire, like Lewis questionnaire. So these two tools, they are very easy, cheap.
Yeah, they are not expensive.
They are not expensive. Everybody can use them. It's very easy to learn how to do it. So it is instead of use very I don't know, expensive tools. So this is very basic one that everybody can use at altitude to control their condition.
Definitely. You mentioned something really important about the psychology, and I always say the same to those that never been in Sierra Nevada. It looks amazing on Instagram, the sunset, the facility, etc., etc. But when you are up there for over 15 days, there is no fun at all, because there's a lot of time off that you can't do anything, because for those that never been in there are no clubs, or there's not any place where you can go and party. Especially during summertime. Wintertime, because of the ski resort, there is more life. But summertime is you, the other athletes, and some wild goats that can be found, and cows that can be found around. So psychologically speaking, it's also a challenging time for athletes. Right?
Yeah, that's true. So I think also this is a very important role of the coach and of the team. So first of all, actually, the team should be supportive between each other. It's very important, actually, in every sport. And the second story is about coach should be attentive to their athletes and try to also to create some very great environment to sustain this like isolation. And also, I think it's a very good mental story about like there are different periods of times, and you should explain to your athletes, and they should understand this. It is very great time when you can focus only on your performance. You can focus on your what things are happening inside your head. You can focus more on your technique. You can focus more on your particular sport. So here you like it's also it's a great opportunity and unique environment when you can actually isolate yourself from the entire noises and just focus on your goals, your technique, what you want to achieve this year, for example, and things like this. And having your friends, your team, your coach near, and creating a great environment, it can be actually, you can create best training camps ever at altitude. And I really love, actually, also we go a lot in Font-Romeu, for example. It's 1,800 meters in France training camp. So it's like, it's very separated from the life. You go there, you like go to the moon. So nobody is there. It's very isolated part. But there you get used to this type of life. You get used that you are here for more focused on your job, on your goals, and then it's really great. And actually, it's one of the best and more effective training camps that we have had during the season because of this.
Yeah. Once you come down from the mountain, is there any kind of specific things that coach should do, or once you are down, it's like coming back to the normal situation, and you can do whatever you used to do before?
So here also, yes, it's very important to go through the whole step and make the also individualization of the altitude training. And I didn't say that one of the most important tools for the understanding how athlete actually reacted to the altitude is to measure total hemoglobin mass. So I strictly recommend to everybody do this measurement before the altitude. And this is the measurement that coach should do after, to understand when actually his athletes is making peak performance after the altitude. And actually going down to the altitude is also it's also starting not when you are already going down from altitude training camp. It actually starts a little bit before, actually a couple of days before. So coach should change his training loads, like he's tapering athlete for the competitions. So he should decrease volume and a bit decrease of the intensity. This will help to avoid the influence on the immune function of the athlete, because also this change of the environment influence a lot in the immune function. So, and will be not really good story to have athlete after a training camp and after gaining all his adaptation to have him ill after the altitude training camp. And this is one very important thing. And then the second one, of course, it's about reacclimatization period. So there are, one of the most important questions is about, like, for coaches who is using altitude training for the tapering for the performance for the competition. So it's very important to know when is decrease of performance of his athlete, when is increase of performance of his athlete. And like there are like regular standard days that we know, for example, like day 3, 4, then we have decrease about day 7 till day 12, and then after, like, to be very sure, everybody is starting after then day 14. But so here there is no like yes, any golden rule that will not change these days. So of course, with every athlete, it's very important to individualize this approach. And for the coaches who work for a long period of time with their athletes, and for the athletes who has very long experiences in altitude training, so everybody is knowing, days of the peaking after the altitude. And so, for example, this paper that I mentioned in the very beginning, our idea was to develop the mathematical model for the prediction of the peak performance after the altitude. And actually, we did it. Now we tested. Yeah, and it will be, I think it will be like one of the answers to the question of the coaches. Actually, when is the peak performance for my athletes after the altitude? So, so for everyone, it's like the question about only of guessing and trying and about the experience. So it's very important to know these days. It's very important to understand when your athlete is peaking performance, and it's very important to understand when is the decrease of performance, to not put starts on these days. And there are also different combination that also coaches can use after the altitude training. For example, the combination of the hypoxia and heat is working very well, and because of the physiological adaptation. So, for example, you go to the altitude to increase your total hemoglobin mass amount, and then you go to the heat to increase your blood volume. They are related in the linear relationship, so you will gain in these two environments a lot. So, but
there is always a but.
yeah, there is always a but, because so, like, everybody should be ready for this. Like, athletes should be ready, because it's very it's environmental stress is very can be severe, and some athletes, they sustain very good altitude but not sustain good heat. Some athletes sustain good heat but not sustain good altitude. So like in my practice, I met a lot of athletes who hated altitude. But for example, they hated this because so many mistakes were done, actually. And I heard a lot of athletes who told me that we are non-responders to the altitude. But I was asking, but why you think you are non-responders? You did genetic tests or what? Oh no, I didn't have any performance enhancement enhancement effect after the altitude. But this is doesn't mean actually that athletes doesn't respond. So and for me, it's when athlete didn't have any performance increment after the altitude. It's actually a question for me, but why he didn't have it? So I should analyze all the data and understand where was the mistake, if it was. So where was the problem? So what we should change for the next time? Maybe, for example, this altitude wasn't enough for him to have any reaction. So he went
stimulus.
1,800 meters, but maybe he need to go
higher
to 2,000 meters, for example. Yes. Or maybe it can be opposite story. Maybe it's too high for him. So maybe he should start with a lower altitude and go first to very low altitude, like 1,400 meters, and just adapt and see how your body reacts to this small altitude, and then only keep going to the higher altitude. So like gradually adapt to the altitude. So this is very long story.
Yeah, definitely. And I do agree with you, because a lot of people, and this is my next question, but before I jump into this one, a lot of people said, no, I went to altitude once and it didn't work. And you start asking questions like, okay, but have you measured your iron levels before going up there? No, I didn't. So perhaps, as you well said, if you don't have enough iron in your body, you're not gonna generate any new red blood cells. So that's more than proven already. So it's
there's some basic things, but for example, you have a lot of iron, but you have not a lot of B12 or folic acid, so it will not work.
It will not work. Yeah. So it's not as simple as just going up to the mountain and kill yourself up there. So there's a lot of science in behind that. So
another story, actually, I will interrupt you, sorry, with the hypoxic altitude generator, so like I know some athletes who just took hypoxic generator and then put it the highest altitude the generator can give. And then they thought, I don't have any effect from the altitude training. Actually, I have the decrease of the performance after this, but oh my God, if you sleep at 6,000 meters, so for sure you will have problems after.
Problems with that. Yeah, and it's, as I said, I think it's a topic that is becoming more popular because of the number of athletes who are using these methods to enhance performance. We were saying, especially in triathlon, and I was having a chat with Ari, the Norwegian coach. They spend here and also in Font Romeo most of the year. So we met
in Sierra Nevada, met in Font Romeo. So yes, in Lausanne it was a World Cup, the final World Cup. Yeah, so they was coming really straight away from the altitude.
Yeah, definitely. So that was my next question. Well, before I move into that, I feel extremely privileged that we have Nasser watching this live talk. So for me, actually, when I saw his name, I started shaking. It's high pressure for me to have such an icon watching our live coffee talk. So hi from Spain. And I'm sorry for
Nasser is
what
my very good friend, and I am really happy to work with him for so long time. And hey, I miss you, Nasser.
He doesn't know, but I have a huge background in the Middle East because I lived in almost 3 years in Kuwait, 1 year in Bahrain, and I keep visiting the Middle East quite often. So I'm really, really attached to this part of the world. So you were saying about the responders and non-responders. So is there any science behind a part of what you say? You can be genetically like ready to gain these benefits of altitude or not? Or how does it work for those that are responders and non-responders? Is like a rule, or how does it work?
So actually, this years I start to avoid this words like responders and non-responders, because it was very fancy to say this in 2002, 2004. So like it was explanation because why some people didn't react to the altitude, but actually with the time a lot of specialists started to use this words to explain like why person didn't respond to the altitude. So the main story behind this this word is that this person is not genetically responding to the low level of the oxygen because of his genetic predisposition, and he is not extracting enough EPO like a reaction to this low oxygen. But this yes, amount of these people is like only 2%, if I don't mind. And actually it was the same story, I guess, in training. Like it was the not theory, but there were some publication that there were non-responders to the training, to the high intensity training. So actually this is the same story.
The same story.
So, and in some period of time, this word became an excuse why person doesn't have respond to altitude. So if athlete comes to the coach and he says, or after this training camp at altitude, I didn't felt any benefit from the altitude training, and immediately coach answer to the athlete that, oh, you are non-responder. But behind this, actually, before you to say this, you need to do genetical test and see that the athlete is non-responder. But only if there are only 2% of non-responders, so most probably your athlete respond, but was some mistake and or was some issue that you should find and actually help athlete to have this benefit next time.
So for those that live in high altitude, like Mexico City, and this is a question that my colleague Claudia will really benefit from it, because she lives in Mexico City, and we always discuss what they should do. What kind of considerations for those that have been born, raised, or continuously living in high altitude should do in order to improve their performance?
So for the high altitudes is very different and interesting story, and I really love from one point of view the studies that did Walter Schmidt and Nicole Promer. So they did studies measuring total hemoglobin mass in the people who was born in the high altitude, and they really demonstrated a very high amount of the total hemoglobin mass. But actually it doesn't mean that performance of these people will be extraordinary if they doesn't train anytime. So the main story about the performance, it's that you gain different physiological adaptations, and with these physiological adaptations, improving economy, improving power, improving parameters of the cardiovascular system, VO2 max, and so on, you improve your performance. So for the people who live in an altitude, so they should not only live at altitude but also train in altitude. And there is about other issue for the athletes who is living at altitude, training at altitude, but coming back to the lowlands. So for them, it's also very important actually to not be too long on the lowland, because they are actually, in some period of time, they start to lose their hematological, for example, adaptation that they gained in the altitude. And through some period of time, actually, they should come back to the altitude to not to lose their adaptation that they gained already. So, of course, they have some, if they was raised at altitude and they was training at altitude, like we have amazing examples of the Eton Kenya and a lot of athletes coming from the middle altitude, and they have some benefits comparing to the athletes who didn't raise at altitude. But they need to keep going, being at altitude to promote their physiological adaptation, and sometimes they need to go higher to have better physiological adaptation. It's always like with the training. So for athlete who achieved his very high potential level, so he needs to improve more his training load and training intensity to keep going this impulse of the training load very high.
So do you recommend for those that Mexico as an example, I just bring it up, they should even go higher to get like different stimulus, so better stimulus, despite of having born or lived in this altitude for the entire life? So would that
this
be...
is very, this is very individual. You should every athlete should measure his parameters. So for example, if he at altitude he doesn't have any decrease of the saturation, his saturation at the Mexico City is 98, and during the training load his amount of the oxygen in the blood is also doesn't go really down, so he's not really doing altitude training. He's doing normal training. Yeah, so if he doesn't have a hypoxic impulse, he doesn't have any response for this type of the impulse. The same story with the training dose. If you don't have enough training dose, you will not your body, your physiological mechanism, they will not respond to this dose. So
that's quite interesting. So it's
like dose response story, not linear, but
so it's for you, it's key to measure, to continuously measure the physiological parameters in order to see whether there is an adaptation, there is a response or not, right?
Yes.
And this is your role as a doctor when you go to the high altitude camps, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, so this is one of my roles that from one point of view, yes, I should control what is going on there with the health of the athletes and so on, but huge part of my work is actually to measure different parameters, blood oxygen saturation and muscle saturation, for example, and lactate and others. So we measure different parameters and then we analyze them. So if you have like 12 athletes every day, you have some data about their, like we do some night recovery monitoring, so how they recover it and so on. So like if you have from every athlete each day some amount of information, you should analyze this information and provide it to the coach as fast as possible. So we're also measuring a lot of power data and data in the gym and technical data. So it's very
nowadays, I used to say nowadays we're coaching human beings, but we are also coaching numbers. So it's the amount of info we can gather nowadays is unlimited, and I think it's key what you say. Gather it, analyze it, take decisions, and just transfer it to the coach or whoever is prescribing the training. I think is key, and I think everybody that been on these coffee talks before agreed on the importance of multidisciplinary teams. Each of us have a role, because if you're alone, you're gonna lack on something. Either knowledge, resources, so it's almost impossible to cover all the areas. So we have 15 minutes because Instagram only allows us for an hour. So I'm gonna give the ground to whoever wanna ask questions. You are free to answer them or not. And then there was one really interesting about the I cannot pronounce this word. The cameras, okay, I'm just gonna read it. Do you recall hyperoxygen training in the lab at sea level after altitude training? I do believe that means this how do you call it, the devices? Yeah, hyperoxygen chambers or.
No, I understand the question.
Yeah.
Before I go to this question, I actually want to just finish your idea about the coaching numbers and things like this. So I think is very important step forward for the coaches. Like when you have objective numbers, you can actually, you know what to improve. So you can measure different physiological capacities and you can improve them very directly. And if you don't, I don't remember who said this phrase, like if you don't measure, you cannot improve it. So it's very important. But from other point of view, you can actually have so many data that you will be not able to analyze it. And I think also coaches should not run for the every data that is possible to get from their athletes. So it's important to choose very informative data, but if you will, very sustainable in their collection. And if it provides you enough information, so it will be like a very great tool for the improvement of the athletes. So if you have like 10 years of the data of your athletes and very important parameters, so it will be really very great tool for you as a coach or as a sports scientist who is working with you. And yes, it's very important to have this multidisciplinary team. And coming back to the question with the hyperoxia, so it's actually there are a lot now of, it's a bit different story, and now there are a lot of publications related to this topic of hyperoxic therapy, and there are some publications that show that it improves economy, for example, and there are some publications that are showing that it helps for the athletes with the overtraining syndrome. So sometimes hyperoxia also is used at the altitude to make it easier for athletes to do sprints in the altitude, for example, and do hyperoxia during the recovery periods. And I know in the Colorado Training Center they used a lot sprints and hyperoxia, for example. And like this is completely separated topic, and I think here is nothing to do with hypoxic training, but this tool is also very interesting and can be used. And hyperoxic training, for example, from the physiological mechanism is very good for the stability of the membranes. So if you would love to work more on the antioxidant pathway, so this can help a lot. But from the other point of view, so if there is a redox stress, athlete can also suffer from this. So coming to this method, you should understand why you use it and when you need it and why
the
you
consequences.
need it. So,
yes, definitely. Good. So there's another question that says, if you have any experience with athletes who have competed at sea level the following day or 2 days after coming back from altitude. You said
yes.
You just said the best days are day 3 and 4, and then from
no, not best day, bad days.
Sorry, bad days. Sorry, you said that. Bad days. I got it wrong. I need to read your paper.
So this is very individual for the athletes. So some athletes, they can actually is a bit risky situation. So for athletes should understand the risk that they come down, and they will, if they understand that, and they know, it's very important, if they know when coming back from the altitude they are feeling great at the first and second day, and they can compete and show their best performance, so they can do it. And I've had athletes who are 100% knowing that first and second day the very best day for them. And also I had some athletes for whom day 14 was worse than the first and second day. So I from my athletes, I have some that that we know that they should compete, they should stop altitude or hypoxic training, go down and compete immediately, and it will, this approach will be best for them. So this like this only the question of the experience. And then I know athletes who have competed on the day 3 or 4, and for them these days are not really the worst days of the performance. It's for them regular performance, but they have decrease on day 5 or 6. So here the one thing that you should remember, that there is always risk that this first week is not a really best performance can happen. But if you are sure that it will happen, so and you
Go
try
for
it, not like you are self-confident and I'm sure that the best performance will be. No, you already tried this, and you understood that yes. So I'm showing a good performance in these first, second days. Why not? You can also do it before important competition, but trying before. So why not?
Yeah. I had this conversation with Javier Arguelles from is the biomechanic in the higher altitude center in Granada, and he said, because he's been working there for almost 10 years, if not more, and has also a huge experience in high altitude. He said he have seen everything, like people competing at the best on day 1, day 2, day 3. So it's actually really, really individual as everything in training. So there are not like rules that can be applied to everybody. So it's best is just to try. If it works. If it doesn't, just find another strategy. That's I think what is important.
Yes, that's true. That is why I'm not also, when I just started to work with altitude training, so I was more categorized with this story. But then after years of the practice, I understood that here, yes, it's always you should try and understand what is best for your athlete, or if athlete is trying to understand for himself, he should actually understand what is best for him.
Okay. Because you also do a lot of research, if you had to give an advice to the development coaches who are always seeking for information and resources and new ways of increasing the knowledge, where they should go and find this kind of info?
So I don't know, from me it can be very difficult to advise because me personally as a scientist, I'm going to the pubmed.com, and there I just go through the papers, and then so as I am for a long period of time, I'm in following different topics, so I understand what, and I'm looking what new, like every Friday I look at what new we have in altitude training. For example, you put keywords like altitude training, so I know, so this week we had this new paper on altitude training. And also is like already professional deformation in the conferences. I can hear like if the material is of this year or last year, or when scientists stopped to follow the updates and so on. But for coaches, what I found actually for them is quite difficult to go through the real scientific papers. And that is why also I actually started to write a lot of different types of like popular articles and explaining in the popular way what does it mean, and giving talks and lectures about also altitude training. So and trying to simplify this the things and these approaches, and trying to simplify to make it more practical, you know, because when you read like 10 papers, you don't, at the very end of the story, you doesn't understand, but how practically I can apply it. And I think so I'm the person who is actually doing this for coaches, so I'm translating scientific research into the practice, but some tools where to go and to see, I don't know, I love Jan Lemur infographics.
Yeah, infographics, they are quite good.
Simple some of his papers or papers of his colleague. I really love the Asker You Can Group, also website, My Sports Science, where also there are a lot of infographics, and he tries to explain in the very simple way. There is sports science, I think, community. They try to also translate some research. I'm not following them really well, so I cannot say about the quality, but I saw that they try to do this type of work. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah, no, I saw you were writing some mini posts on your Instagram regarding different topics. So I think this is really important, and a topic I already discussed, because now I know he's listening with Roberto Cejuela, and he is also doing it, like writing this short mini post in a language that the coaches can really understand. Because if we we keep using the scientific terms, and we sound really scientific, then the message is not reaching, because not everybody has an academic background. So I think this is it takes time away from us, and but I think it's something we should all start doing in order to bridge this gap between the science and the proper practice, because I do believe there is a huge gap that not everybody, if they go through a paper, can understand it. So thank you very much for doing that, because I think it's quite valuable.
Yes, very important. And actually, this is chat that I had with Steve Ingham from English Institute of Sport, and he wrote amazing book supporting to the champion. I actually strictly recommend for everyone who is working to read it. And so he told me the story when he was a student and he came to the to working with the rowing UK team. So he came, and one of the athletes, who is I think gold medalist, asked him about like, what should I do? And he told, oh, in this paper was like this result. And then he's telling, but then I understood he doesn't care about the papers. He cares about, will bring this, what he recommend him to do, improvement of the performance, bring him to the medal or not. And then this story also a bit changed my approach and changed my understanding, because when you are in the laboratory and when you go to the ECSS and different conferences, so it's very important speak like a scientist, showing great results of your study in very proper way. But then you need to actually change your head and put another head when you come to the coaches and athletes, and actually forget about all these academical backgrounds and try to explain, as you explained to your daughter, what is this altitude training and why should she need to use it, or some results, some approaches in the very simple way. And then the main story is to convince to try, because everybody actually is very scared to try something new.
Things. Definitely.
Yeah, something new. So everybody is used to do very regular things that already brought them to the success, and they think that actually we need to do this always, and every time we will come back, we will come to our goals. But to improve, you need to change things, and to try something new is always very scary for people. So you need to convince, also to try to convince them to do it.
Yeah, definitely. It needs to get out of the comfort zone, because it's where the magic happens. So Irene, thank you very much for your time. It's been, as always, a pleasure to have a chat with you. So 1 hour just went by like that. So thank you very much once again for your valuable input and info. I will definitely ask you to send me some of the papers you mentioned and some of the resources you just mentioned, so I can share it with the rest, and especially your latest paper. And that's it. So I hope this situation all over the world just finish as soon as possible, and everybody is back to the normal schedules and works and everything. So hopefully next time it's a real coffee talk, no through Instagram.
Talk, yes, in Sierra Nevada. Yes, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you so much for this great coffee talk, and hope to see you soon.
Have a good day. Just for your one info, this coffee talk will be available on YouTube in a couple of days. So as soon as I have time to edit it, because here only lasts for 24 hours. So for those that have missed it, it's going to be available there among the others. Okay. So thank you very much once again, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. And bye to everybody. Thank you.